Question number 1. Which of the following limits does not exist? Answer choice A, we have limit as x approaches -2. So let's look at this graph. As x approaches -2 from left-hand side, it approaches 1, right? This value is 1. From right-hand side, it also approaches 1, right? So answer choice A is equal to 1. Answer choice B, limit as x approaches -1, right? So as x approaches -1 from left-hand side, it approaches 0, right? From right-hand side, it approaches 3. This is a 3, right? So the left-hand limit and right-hand limit, they are different. In this case, this limit doesn't exist, right? So limit does not exist. So the answer is B. Let's look at answer choice C. As x approaches 0, right? So let's look at left-hand limit first. As x approaches 0 from left-hand side, it approaches 2, right? From right-hand side, it also approaches 2, right? So limit value is 2. The answer choice D, as x approaches 1, we always have to look at left-hand limit and right-hand limit. So left-hand limit, as x approaches 1 from left-hand side, it approaches 3, right? Right-hand side, it also approaches 3, right? So the limit value is 3. Question number 2. For which of the following values of a does limit as x approaches a f of x is equal to 3? Okay, answer choice A, we have -2. If a is -2, okay, what's the limit? As x approaches -2 from left-hand side, that's 1, right? From right-hand side, it also approaches 1. So limit value is equal to 1, not 3, right? So A is not the answer. Okay, B, we have -1. So -1. As x approaches -1 from left-hand side, it approaches 0. From right-hand side, it approaches 3, right? The left-hand limit and the right-hand limit, they're different. In this case, limit does not exist. Not equal to 3, right? So B is not the answer. C, we have 0. So if we have 0 here, okay, let's check the limit value. As x approaches 0 from left-hand side, that approaches 2. From right-hand side, it also approaches 2, right? So the limit value is equal to 2, not 3. Okay, D, we have 1. If x approaches 1 from left-hand side, that approaches 3. From right-hand side, that also approaches 3, right? So limit as x approaches 1 f of x is equal to 3. So the answer has to be D. Question number 3. Which of the following statements is true? Okay, first one, we have limit as x approaches 1 from left-hand side is equal to limit as x approaches 1 from right-hand side. Okay, let's see if this is true. So as x approaches 1 from left-hand side, it approaches +3, right? From right-hand side, it also approaches +3. So first one is true. Okay, second one, we have limit as x approaches 1 is equal to f of 1. Well, as x approaches 1, it approaches 3. From right hand side, it also approaches 3. So limit value is 3, right? So limit value is 3. What's f of 1? When x is 1, the value is actually right here, which is equal to 1, right? So f of 1 is equal to 1. So they're not equal to each other. So the second part is false. Okay, third part. This should be third. Okay. Limit as x approaches -2. So let's find the limit value as x approaches -2. As x approaches -2 from left hand side, it approaches 1. From right hand side, it also approaches 1, right? So this value right here is 1. F of 1, that's 1, right? So they are equal to each other. So this is true. So which of the following statement is true? The 1 and 3, right? The answer has to be D. Question number 4. Which of the following statement is true? Answer choice A, we have limit as x approaches 0 from right hand side. What does function f of x plus 1 approach to? So let's say x approaches 0 from right hand side. Okay, what about x plus 1? All you have to do is add 1 each side. Then x plus 1 approaches 1 from right hand side, right? Let's say x is 0.01, right? Since x approaches 0 from right hand side, it could be 0.01, 0.001, right? Those values. If x is 0.01, all of this value is 1.01. If x is 0.001, x plus 1 would be 1.001. It actually approaches to 1 from right hand side, right? So as x approaches 0 from right hand side, x plus 1 approaches 1 from right hand side, then function as x plus 1 approaches 1 from right hand side, it approaches 3, right? So it is not 2. It is equal to 3. Does that make sense? What if as x approaches 0 from left hand side? Same thing. As x approaches 0 from left hand side, all you have to do is add 1 here. So x plus 1 approaches 1 from left hand side. So as x plus 1 approaches 1 from left hand side, the function approaches 3, right? So this is not 2, this is a 3. Does that make sense? Answer choice C. This time we have limit as x approaches 1 from right hand side. What does f of 1 minus 2x approach to? Okay, so x approaches 1 from right hand side. Here we have minus 2x, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply each side by -2 times -2 times -2. Then we have a -2x approaches 1 times -2, -2. When negative number is multiplied, this direction actually changes. So -2x approaches -2 from left hand side. Okay, think about this. If x is let's say x has to be a little greater than 1, right? So let's say x is 1.01, 1.01. So if x is 1.01, negative 2 times 1.01, that's negative 2.02, right? That's actually little less than negative 2. If negative 2 is here, negative 2.02 is somewhere here, right? So it actually approaches negative 2 from left hand side. Does that make sense? So whenever negative is multiplied, this direction actually changes. Okay? So let me continue this problem. So we have negative 2x approaches to negative 2 from left hand side, and here we have 1, right? So we have to add 1. Then 1 minus 2x approaches negative 2 plus 1, that's negative 1 from left hand side. So let's look at this graph right here. As 1 minus 2x approaches negative 1 from left hand side, the function approaches to 0, right? So this function approaches 0, not 3. Okay, and answer choice D. This time we have x approaches 1 from left hand side. What about 1 minus 2x? So as x approaches 1 from left hand side, what about negative 2x? Multiply each side by negative 2. So that approaches negative 2, direction changes, right? And 1 minus 2x approaches to plus 1 minus 1. It approaches to negative 1 from right hand side, right? So as 1 minus 2x approaches negative 1 from right hand side, what does function approach to? Function approaches to 3, right? So it approaches 3. So the answer has to be D. Question number 5. What is the value of limit as x approaches to function f of x squared minus 5? Okay, let's say x approaches 2 from left hand side. Then what about x squared? X squared approaches 4, right? But is it from left hand side or right hand side? You know, this x value right here is a little less than 2, right? So if x is, let's say this is 1.99, then 1.99 squared, that's a little less than 4, right? So this x squared approaches 4 from left hand side. Does that make sense? Okay, what if x approaches 2 from right hand side? Then x squared approaches 4 from right hand side, right? If x is value, let's say this is 2.01, then x squared would be little greater than 4, right? Because 2 squared is 4. So here we have x squared minus 5, right? So x squared minus 5 approaches to, you know, what we have to do is we subtract 5 each side, right? So 4 minus 5, that's negative 1. So negative 1 from left hand side, you know, x squared minus 5 approaches, you know, negative 1 from right hand side, right? Okay, so as x approaches negative 2 from left hand side, x squared minus 5 approaches negative 1 from left hand side. As x approaches 2 from right hand side, x squared minus 5 approaches negative 1 from right hand side. So as x squared minus 5 approaches negative 1, as x squared minus 5 approaches negative 1 from left hand side, the function approaches to 0, right? as x squared minus 5 approaches -1 from right hand side, excuse me, it approaches 3, right? So what is this limit value? This limit value doesn't exist. That's D and E, because the left-hand limit and right-hand limit is not equal to each other. Question number 6. What is the value of limit as x approaches -1 from left-hand side? We have x squared over f of x. So let's say x approaches -1 from left-hand side. Then what about x squared? X squared approaches -1 squared, that's +1, right? But is it from right-hand side or left-hand side? Let's think about this. X is the value less than -1, right? So it could be -1.01. If we square that, negative times negative, that's a positive. And this value right here is, without negative, this value right here is greater than 1, right? Little greater than 1. So if we square this, that's going to be little greater than 1, right? So x squared actually approaches 1 from right-hand side, because this value right here is going to be little greater than 1. 1.01 squared, that's going to be actually 1.02, right? It's approximately 1.02. So we know that x squared approaches 1 from right-hand side. Make sense? Okay, what about function f of x? Function f of x approaches to, as x approaches -1 from left-hand side, look at this graph. The function actually approaches to 0. It approaches to 0 from positive value, right? Look at this value right here. They're positive. Function value is y value, right? So it approaches 0 from positive values. So it approaches 0 from positive values, from right-hand side, right? So this one approaches 1, right? And this one approaches 0. Then what about all of this? All of this value right here. That's going to be equal to, it'll approach to 1 over, think about this, denominator is approaching 0. Let's say 0.001. That's actually what? 1 over 1/1000. If you simplify this, that's going to be 1000, right? If f of x is 0.0001, then we have 1 over 10,000. So that's going to be not 1,000, 10,000, right? So this value increases infinitely, right? So the answer has to be D. Question number 7. What is the value of limit as x approaches -1 cosine function f of x minus 1? So x approaches -1, right? Then what about x minus 1? We subtract 1 each side. Then it gives us x minus 1 approaches -1 minus 1, -2, right? So as x minus 1 approaches -2 from left-hand side, -2 from left-hand side, the function approaches 1, right? From right-hand side, it also approaches 1. So we know that function f of x minus 1 approaches 1. Then what about cosine f of x minus 1? What does this value approach to? This one approaches 1, right? So this is just the cosine 1. All right? So the answer has to be B. Question number 8. What is the value of limit as x approaches -2 f of x? Okay, so x approaches -2 from left hand side. If x approaches -2 from left hand side, it approaches 1. From right hand side, it approaches 1, right? So we know that function f of x approaches 1, right? So as x approaches -2, f of x approaches 1. So far so good? Then what about f of x? So we have f of x. Let me change this function with a. I'm going to substitute a for f of x. Then this is equal to f of a, right? Now our input is a. The function is f still. So here we have a function f of x, but instead of x, we have a, right? So I'm going to change this variable a right here. So this is f of a, right? Here, this capital A, which is equal to this, that approaches 1, right? So as a approaches 1 from left hand side, it approaches 3. What about from right hand side? As a approaches 1 from right hand side, it approaches also 3, right? So limit value of this must be equal to 3. So the answer has to be 3.